Today we're going to show you one of the ways you can search for legislation on the Indiana General Assembly website. One of the most important factors in locating bills you're interested in is knowing what committee they are a part of. There are many different subject areas committees focus on, including education, insurance, transportation, public health, and finances. Fear not, we will explain how to navigate these various committees and how you can best find your bill and more information about it. As you can see when clicking the Committees dropdown, you are met with several options to open up. These will all open PDFs to the corresponding information. Now, because there is no session actively happening right now, you're going to see stuff from earlier this year in this previous session. Let's click on the Senate committee schedule and we'll see what comes up. As you can see here, we get some conference committees for bills that happened last session. There are no standing committee meetings scheduled at this time because the session does not happen until earlier next year. So this is helpful during session. As you can see, this is a good way to view what the Senate is meeting with on a particular day, and in this case, it is the conference committee schedule or when the Senate meets to discuss a bill that had approved changes in the House. Now let's return back to that drop-down. The other options, including the House committee schedule under standing committees, the Senate, House, and conference committee schedules under conference committees, and the interim committee schedule under interim committees, will not have much relevant information as session is not active right now. However, we can look at the View All Committees portion. Here we see a comprehensive look at all of the committees. This is helpful to see how legislation is organized and what areas are typically focused on during the session. First off, we see standing committees, or committees that always exist during the session. The House and Senate will have a lot of similar committees and some different. I focused a lot on education during last session, so let's go ahead and click on that in both the House and the Senate to give you an example of the information you can find under these hyperlinks. So when we click on this link, we're taken directly to a Past Meetings tab. And as I've discussed, there are currently not scheduled meetings as session is not in effect, but we can look at the past meetings to get a good overview of what you would see if you were looking at this page during session. Now let's go ahead and click on February 21st. If we were in the Senate chambers at this point in 2024, this is the legislation that they would be hearing. Here we see several different bills. The hyperlinks by the bill numbers would bring you to more information about the bills, but there is a brief explainer underneath each to give a brief summary. So as you can see, House Bill 1001 says Education and Higher Education Matters. I know that's pretty general, so if you wanted to click on this hyperlink, that will give you more information. If you click the plus next to the bill documents, this will show you the different bill documents, so even more specific things, including amendments, short description, etc. And under each bill, you'll also see the authors and sponsors, the authors being the ones who drafted each bill, and the sponsors being the ones who present and support it in the opposite house. Additionally, you'll see the committee vote status, so if the committee votes on a piece of legislation or if it's still in progress, you'll have an update here. As you can see in this particular hearing, House Bill 1001 did pass with 7 yeses and 4 noes. On this blue portion, you'll also see a PDF button and a video button. Here you can see a PDF view of all that we just discussed and also watch the corresponding video for each of these sessions. Now let's go back and take a look at what a House Committees page would look like. Now the House Education Committee's meetings present similarly to the Senate. Now if we go ahead and click again on February 27th, Tuesday at 8:30 is when they met. If we were there at this time, we would have only been hearing this one bill. So again, this has all the same information. It has a brief description underneath. If you show bill documents, it will have a list of the amendments, has the authors, the sponsors, and the committee vote status. And again, we can also look at the PDF view of everything we just discussed up here, and then we can also watch the corresponding video. Now let's look at some of the other committee resources. Okay, from here, I'm going to go back up to Committees, View All Committees, and we saw the standing committees. However, we're going to go ahead and take a look at conference committees. As discussed in previous videos, conference committees are mostly private meetings of lawmakers when trying to determine whether changes to bills made in the opposite house should be accepted or changed before moving to the governor. These are some examples of bills where the members of the House and Senate had to meet to compromise on some of these changes. Now, I'm going to show you, for example's sake, one in the House and one in the Senate. Let's go ahead and just click on this conference committee for Senate Bill 4. The site's functionality lacks here. The majority of the bills clicked on show a prolonged loading screen. Because these meetings are mostly private, there isn't a ton of information that will normally show up here. But one resource I'll point out if you're curious is these pages show who is on these conference committees, as in which lawmakers are in the room to compromise on bill changes. As usual, you can click on each of these lawmakers to learn more about them. Now we're going to go ahead and navigate back here, and if we click on a conference committee for one of the House bills, it will be a similar story. You'll kind of just see the House bill, it's normal information like we discussed before, but again, we can see the different people who are in this conference committee and click on each of them to learn more about them. Now we're going to go ahead and navigate back. Now we're going to scroll down to the interim study committees. Now these are formed when the session is not going on to take a look at important issues and inform potential future legislation on these topics. For example's sake, let's go ahead and click on the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. Now, as you can see, there are no meetings currently scheduled for this. However, if they were meeting and doing different studies, you would be able to click here. You can go ahead and see if any of the other ones happen to have anything coming up. I wouldn't guess at this moment. Yep. So there's nothing much to show for this right now, but typically at a certain point in the year, normally later in the year, there will be more information here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and scroll back up and go back to the committees page. That was your look into committees on the IGA site. Now let's move on to the legislation tab. This was how you can find legislation by the committees tab. For reference, committee schedules and agendas will generally be posted that night before they meet. Once you know how to navigate this portion of the website to figure out which bills are within which committees, I suggest keeping an eye on the schedules as the committees meet to determine when your bills will be heard. The day before a committee hears a bill, you can also sign up to testify in these committees. These are some ways to make the legislation more easily accessible for you and to voice your opinion during these hearings. Next, we'll talk about how to find legislation on the Legislation tab.